I want you to think about something. We have filled up next to us a baptismal that we're going to use a little bit later. There's even a temperature gauge in there to kind of see how warm it finally got. I'm excited for our three baptism candidates here to experience the temperature of that water. But I want you to compare something here. I want you to compare the communion cup that you just used with that. I think it's interesting when we share the communion meal, when we have these little tiny cups. They're small. Think about the size of that little communion cracker that was in here in comparison to the feast that we're going to have over there. It just doesn't compare, does it? It's not quite right, the proportions. What Jesus Christ actually has done, if we're going to compare, is more like that than this. What Jesus Christ provides for us is going to be more like that feast over there, though it isn't there yet, than this, right? So in some ways, we do ourselves a little bit of a disservice when we take communion because it's not nearly big enough. And yet, I think we could see that the proportion of our faith to what we actually receive might be a little more akin to that. How well we trust, how well we believe, how much we believe is maybe a little more akin to those little cups, and what Jesus is offering is more akin to that baptismal, isn't it? Well, that brings us to our actual sermon text this morning. If I can see it and read it, you have to forgive me for keeping my sunglasses on. Anybody remember my password? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. The reality is, I want you to think about this. Matthew chapter 7, verses 7 through 11. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, it will be opened. Or which of you, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone, or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? This really is an incredible passage. That Jesus would say this to not only his disciples, but the entirety of the crowd. It starts out, I think, in verses 7 and 8 with our willingness. What I want to talk to us today about is willingness, doubt, and the goodness of God. Willingness, doubt, and the goodness of God. What Jesus starts out here with is willingness. Ask and it'll be given to you. Seek, you'll find. Knock, it'll be opened. Everybody who asks receives, seeks finds, and one who knocks, it'll be opened. Promise. Is that you or me?
I think that's you.
That's me? Okay. All right. It won't get distracting, I promise. I want you to ask yourself, is your seeker broken? Is your asker on the fritz? Are you actively knocking Or is that something you gave up on a long time ago? Some of us get to that place in our spiritual lives, right? If I were to name certain circumstances, you might tell me, yeah, I've actually kind of given up on God to do that. Have you been there? I'm there with certain situations. And in reading this passage, I'm seeing and understanding I've stopped asking. I've stopped seeking. I've stopped knocking. I have just let the reality of what the situation is just be what it is. Anybody else, fellow givers up like me? Yeah. And maybe that's not the case in the entirety of your Christian life, but maybe there's certain things that I've been asking for that for 40 years, and I'm done. Your willingness can sometimes run out, can't it? And when it comes to your relationship with God, there's something about this passage where Jesus says to us, ask and seek and knock. That we're tempted to just dare to hope again. But that's not always easy. There's something about asking, seeking, and knocking that does something in us that causes us to maybe give up. Because it brings our need and our dependence into focus. And I've said to you in previous sermons that need in some of our minds is a 4-letter word. We don't like being dependent. In fact, again, we just celebrated a whole holiday about being what? Independent. Now, what's good for a country might not be good for an individual. For us to think, I want to be independent of God, of what He wants of me, is actually the greatest kind of slavery that you and I can know, isn't it? To actually realize what I thought was freedom in not being dependent on God and not needing God actually leads us to some of the darkest places we can go. When we actually start asking and seeking and knocking, we have to get to the place in our own hearts that we say, I genuinely have a need for something that I cannot provide for myself. And I think, again, one of the reasons that we don't like being there is because trusting God in that way has consequences. We have to praise Him when He comes through. We have to trust Him when it doesn't seem like He's coming through. We have to wait on Him when the thing that we needed was past due yesterday and a month ago. That is not easy for us. But what Jesus is calling us to here, at least in these first couple verses, is willingness. Willingness to ask and seek and knock. Do you have a communion cup worth of willingness? You may not have a feast of willingness. Do you have a communion cup worth of willingness? That's all He's asking for. Because He knows your frame. He knows that you are but dust. He knows that you are weak. He knows that your seeker is broken. And that it's hard to ask. Does it surprise you that that doesn't come as a surprise to God? He knows how unwilling at times we are because of 1,000 things that we wish were different. Notice for a second. Maybe this will help your asker to be fixed. What happens if you don't ask, seek, and knock? Look at those verses. If I don't ask, I won't receive. And if I don't seek, I won't find. And if I don't knock, the door won't be opened. Now, does God grant us good things without us asking him? Yes, he does. But in those things that you are tempted to not ask about, tempted to not seek him with, tempted to not knock on those doors, it's kind of a foregone conclusion that if you don't do those things, you won't receive. So it brings us to the reality. The reason this is so hard for us, the asking and seeking and knocking, the reason it's so hard for us is because Christianity was always meant to be done in the context of relationship. Relationship with God. It's not a formula. It's not an equation. It's not a business contract. It's a relationship. All of what God is trying to fix with Christianity is relationship. Relationship between him and his creation. Relationship between him and the people that he's made. It's all in that context. And that's why it scares us, myself included. How many of you would say and volunteer to say right away, you know, the relationships in my life, all the relationships that I have in my life are absolutely how I want them to be? Any volunteers to say there's not a single relationship in my life that's out of order? No. We all do, and that's exactly why what we just celebrated in communion is necessary. Restoration of relationships, guys, is possible. Are we asking? Are we seeking? Are we knocking? To have him restore them? Maybe it's not so much the relationship with other people that is so hard for you, but your relationship with God himself. I think that brings us to the very next set of verses. So we've talked about willingness. Let's move on to doubt, verses 9 to 10. Or which of you, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for fish, will give him a serpent? Think about that, boys. I'm looking at you, the kids that bear my last name. Think about that. You ask for pizza, and I give you a rock. Think about that. You ask for a burger, and I give you a snake. What would you think about your dad if he did that? You could say it. What's that? You would say it nicely. Sure, they've learned respect. This is good. But at that point, if I actually gave you a rock instead of bread and a snake instead of pizza or a burger, you would say, what's up with that? That's not what I need. That's not what I want. Those things would actually be harmful to me. Consider eating a rock for a second. Consider trying to keep a snake in your hot dog bun. These are dangerous things. But we sometimes doubt God, don't we? We sometimes wonder if we do ask, is he going to give us something that's going to chip our teeth or poison us? It's in the context of relationship that this asking and seeking and knocking happen. And we have to find our way to trusting God. Relationships with others, relationship with God is messy, and we've seen it go wrong too many times to count. I want to ask a question here, and I would love a little audience participation. Why is it that we don't seek God? What are the reasons? Why don't we ask and seek and knock? Why don't we do those things? Why do we find it so hard to pray? You already know what God's going to say. Yeah. We find other saviors. Why do we find other saviors? To meet our needs. Because we think we can maybe control those other saviors. That's why God scares us. We already know the answers that He's going to give to us, so why ask? That's a one-way relationship. That's not a two-way relationship, right? That's what scares us about it. Why else don't we seek God?
God works in mysterious ways.
Yes, God doesn't make sense a lot of times. Can we be honest enough as a church body to admit that? I don't know why He chose to do this or that, but He chose to. And I may or may not get to the answer that I was looking for. Bill? Anybody not ask because it's better that I don't ask than Him to give me the answer that I don't want to hear? Yeah, exactly. Jeremy?
Sometimes we're just too wrapped up in our own need that we just lose sight of anything beyond ourselves.
Sometimes the bigness of our need, the hopelessness of what happens if God doesn't meet that need, paralyzes us, right? You're exactly right. And on and on and on. Why don't we, Sue, why don't we seek God?
Because I've been asking for 40 years.
Right. Right.
What He does.
Right.
He will.
I think it's helpful. And I think what Jesus is trying to help us do in these two verses, if you really ask, God is not going to give you a stone rather than bread. If I, as a good father, know imperfectly the needs of my children, they might ask me for candy and I might give them instead, no, you need to drink about 3 cups of water first. But that's all that they hear. And they don't know that I'm willing to give them candy after that. Right? By the way, there's candy waiting for you guys, just so you know. You see how it works, though? We might not seek God because we think that He's maybe secretly displeased with us. We might not seek God because we're ultimately just afraid of what we might find if we actually seek Him. We might be afraid of what kind of God He really is. Or we might not be seeking or asking because it's not God that we're worried about finding something out about, but ourselves. The self-realization of me standing in front of a holy God and realizing what's true about myself is sometimes more than I can bear, and so I just avoid Him. We might be afraid of the answer, like Bill said. We might be afraid of what He's going to ask us to do, or what we might have to change. But let's move on to verse 11. Willingness, doubt, and the goodness of God. If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask Him? When we fail to ask God, when we fail to seek God, when we fail to knock and ask that it be opened, it's often because we doubt the goodness of God. Abby, thanks for choosing that song, by the way. I cannot sing that song without finding a sleeve or a tissue or something. I just can't, because isn't it so true that all my life he has been faithful? And all my life he's been so, so good. And so every breath that I've been given, I'm going to sing of the goodness of God. Sometimes we find the goodness of God at its most powerful when God has said no. Have you been there? Because what you receive in the waiting for the thing that you want to be true to be finally true, what you receive in the relying on him when you don't have the thing that you asked for, the thing that you sought, the thing that you knocked about. Maybe that's the only way that I really, really can see and understand his goodness. Because getting him is sometimes better than getting what I asked for. Have you been there? I don't want to lift up my sunglasses right now, by the way. Because I see the same look in your eyes that you would see in mine. That is what asking and seeking and knocking will bring us to. A realization of the sometimes mysterious goodness of God. Do I, as a good father, desire to give good gifts to my kids? You bet I do. My desire to give good gifts to my children, though, does not hold a candle to God's desire and ability to give good gifts to his children. So, what do we do with this? First of all, I want you to start where you're at. Start where you're at. Don't start at already arrived, because then you'll never start at all. Start where you're at. What does relationship with God look like for you today? What does asking and seeking and knocking look like for you today? And many of us short-circuit the process right here when we say, okay, well, I'm going to commit to pray for an hour after church today. No, don't do that. That's right, you heard a pastor say, no, don't do that. Pray for 2 seconds when you need to pray. Every time you need to pray. Lord, help me. Start there. You don't have anything to prove to God. You don't have anything you need to convince him about. You don't have to show him how dedicated you are. He wants relationship with you, not your determination. He wants you. And you're waiting for me to say, to do what? No, he wants you. So start where you're at. Seek to know God. Find reasons to praise, small reasons. How God has been good. Knock, be aware of what opportunities God already has in front of you instead of wanting opportunities that aren't in front of you. That's painful. That's painful for me to hear, right? Start where you're at. Secondly, be honest about your doubt. Unearth it. Be honest about it. Talk to him about it. That might be part of your asking and seeking. God, I don't really trust you right now to do the thing that I think really needs done. And so here I am asking for it, with a fair bit of doubt and wondering if you're going to do the right thing. Can you be that kind of honest with God? Guess what? He already knows that's where your heart's at, so you may as well start there. Be honest about your doubt. Be honest with God in prayer about, Lord, I'm having trouble trusting you. I don't want to ask because sometimes I doubt your goodness, God. And then you can start actually rehearsing. Okay, where has he been good to me? And you can work from there. But start where you're at. Unearth that doubt. Unearth that hindrance in your relationship with him. Be willing to say, God, I'm afraid of what you're going to ask me to do. I'm afraid of the reality of what that looks like. What lies do you believe about God and your relationship with him that need brought to the surface? His desire is your good, not your suffering in realizing what's between you and him. And lastly, do all these things, ask and seek and knock because of God's goodness. Do you and I really believe in God's overwhelming, infinite goodness and his desire to give that to you? God isn't stingy. Okay? He's not stingy. He's generous. He's good. He wants to give you all that he is. So let's believe in that kind of God. Not the little tiny one that's stingy. He's good. So ask and seek and knock because he's good. Amen? Amen.